I'm going to give you some insider knowledge on how to do well on AP multiple choice questions. Get ready, Amy. It's going to blow your mind away. Number one, choose the correct answer. If you choose the correct answer, you will get the question right. I promise you that. The look on your face was wonderful. The second thing, and I would do this before choosing the correct answer. It's good. I mean, if you can do that first, then you're really good. Read the passage. Tip number one, read the passage. Tip number two, answer the question correctly. Jess is going to punch me for insulting her intelligence with these statements. Here's why I'm saying it, and I'm actually being pretty serious with it. You are taking in May an AP English language and composition exam. It is a writing test. The whole point is to assess your ability as a writer. What is the best way, and I'm being completely sarcastic with this, what is the best way to test your writing ability? Multiple choice questions. Sarcasm. The best way is for you to write, and you're going to be able to do that. But part of it is multiple choice questions, which, hey, let's see how good Ashley is of a writer. Answer these multiple choice questions. Those two things don't generally go hand in hand. What this really is doing is how well can you read the passage and understand and pick up on the argument, because those are things that you're going to have to do when you write. The best thing is to read the passage and take your time with it. Some folks will decide, maybe I'll just look at the questions first, I'll skim over them, I'll figure out what line numbers I have to look at, and those will be the ones that I focus on. But you want to read the passage. If you can understand what you're reading, the questions become so much easier to understand. You, on AP exam, I know I've already mentioned this, you can't use a highlighter. So those of you that are highlighter dependent, you're going to have to kind of break free from that a little bit. But you certainly can mark up the passage. So if you are reading a difficult passage, and this would be a difficult passage, the best thing for you to do as you are reading is to kind of make little notes, just kind of chunk area by area what it is that you are reading so that you can start to kind of figure it out. If you can't figure out what you've read, then you want to go over it and read it again. If you jump into question 13, 14, 15 without understanding this, it's going to be very, very difficult. The other part when I said make sure you choose the correct answer, what's a common way that people will try to answer multiple choice questions, especially if the question is difficult? You can do, like, process of elimination. I know it's not A, I know it's not B, I know it's not C. And there are going to be some instances where you have to do that. But if you can locate the correct answer, where you have a specific point in the text where this is why I know this is the correct one, then your chances of getting it right just go up immensely. Process of elimination works for a couple questions here and there, but overall you want to be able to support why that is your answer. And so those are going to be some things that we take a look at throughout the course of the year. How should we excuse the supine inattention of the pagan and philosophic world to those evidences which were presented by the hand of omnipotence, not to their reason, but to their senses? What the heck does that mean? I could say, what's one word that you know in that sentence? Probably could also ask, what's a word you don't know in that sentence? And we very well might all have something. During the age of Christ, of his apostles, and of their first disciples, the doctrine which they preached was confirmed by innumerable prodigies. The lame walked, the blind saw, the sick were healed, the dead were raised, demons were expelled, and the laws of nature were frequently suspended for the benefit of the church. So lines 1 through 8, plus the word church in line 9. General concept, what's going on? The authority and confidence with which you are saying that.
He's crazy. Yeah, he's crazy.
Okay. What would be like a word or two that would make you go critical, like for the tone? Like within those, and anyone else can certainly answer this one too. Like, where would you say you're definitely getting a negative connotation about contents of the Bible, as opposed to someone going, "Ooh, he's talking about all these wonderful miracles and that kind of stuff"?
Just the way he says the laws of nature.
Okay.
Your teeth kind of like
Right there. And I realize if you're sitting where like Cammy's at or Fiza, you're not going to be able to read this word for word, but you can certainly at least kind of follow along within passage as well. Marissa, are there any other parts you're going to look at? Yeah, okay. No, there's a negative connotation that would be going on at this point. But the sages of Greece and Rome turned aside from the awful spectacle and pursuing the ordinary occupations of life and study, appeared unconscious of any alterations in the moral or physical government of the world. Under the reign of Tiberius, the whole earth, or at least a celebrated province of the Roman Empire, was involved in a preternatural darkness of 3 hours. Boy, we had our solar eclipse for like 2 seconds. They had 3 hours. Think about wearing those glasses for 3 hours, checking it out. That was a big moment for us. Even this miraculous event, which ought to have excited the wonder, the curiosity, and the devotion of mankind, passed without notice in an age of science and history. So, even this miraculous event, which ought to have excited the wonder, the curiosity, and the devotion of mankind, passed without notice in an age of science and history. What is the point that he's trying to make about this miraculous event?
it's kind of just saying that he doesn't think it happened.
And even if, I mean, he certainly wasn't there to say it happened or didn't, but if it did happen, you would expect that someone who's going to be devoted to science and history would have made note to it. Take note that preternatural darkness of 3 hours, you do have a footnote by it, which is telling you at the time of Christ's death on the cross. So this big blackout that would have been taking place at the time of his death, there is no reference to it made by anyone within the science field at that time. It happened during the lifetime of Seneca and the elder Pliny, who must have experienced the immediate effects or received the earliest intelligence of the prodigy. Each of these philosophers in a laborious work has recorded all the great phenomena of nature, earthquakes, meteors, comets, and eclipses, which his indefatigable curiosity could collect. Both the one and the other have omitted to mention the greatest phenomenon to which the mortal eye has been witness since the creation of the globe. A distinct chapter of Pliny is designed for eclipses in extraordinary nature and unusual duration, but he contents himself with describing the singular effect of light which brought the murder of Caesar, when during the greatest part of the year the orb of the sun appeared pale and without splendor. This season of obscurity, which cannot surely be compared with the preternatural darkness of the Passion, has been already celebrated by most of the poets and historians of that memorable age. So what is the comparison that ends up taking place down here towards the bottom? You compare the Passion or the crucifixion of Christ to what other main historical event? Not the death of Christ, but the death of Caesar. And when you take a look at the death of Caesar, you have more people making reference to that one, whether it be poets, historians, and things of that nature. You do not have many people making reference to the darkness that would be taking at the time of the crucifixion or the Passion. So when you read the article, there tends to be two viewpoints of it. Number one, this person is being critical of the contents of the Bible and maybe doubting their existence, or you'll get the other view, he's talking about all these miracles that happen in the Bible, he's celebrating them. If you go with the idea that he's celebrating the Bible, what's going to happen to your questions? They're going to be going in the wrong direction with it. So Lana's initial, even though I might not have said, hey, you sound confident with it, yeah, there is a lot of criticism or a lot of at least questioning that would be taking place about the validity of those events. So if you can understand that he's questioning that overall validity of them, then the chances of you being able to locate correct answers, that jumps up big time. But by breaking it down 5, 10 lines at a time, it gives yourself a better chance, I'd say, of getting those things right. Corey, you know the word spine? No. Shame. It's not a language enrichment word. I should put that on the list. The use of supine, line 1, seems to highly imply that the inattention of the pagan and philosophic world was, what do you think? Completely understandable, of little consequence, result of horrified reaction, momentary lapse, lethargic indifference. What are some ideas that we have. Anna's checking. She's looking, cross-referencing. What'd you go with? Don't look at your cash on the right, because that one's not the same scan font.
Result of that more effective.
Okay, so you were going with C. All right. Any others? Tyler, what'd you go with? C. Double check for C. C. Even if you didn't go with C, people are going to nod their head C now no matter what. Did you go with C? I was looking at Marissa, but Julie said no. What'd Julie go with? E. E. You went D? Okay. Now we're getting some breakdown. Anyone go A or B? And by anyone, I mean Corey.
Yes.
Why? That is a terrible rationale.
I understand it.
Okay. Anyone like really confident?
No.
We're gonna hold on. We'll come back to this one. 14, and the reason, of course, is I hardly would expect many people have a definition for supine in mind, where you would walk in the room and go, "Ooh, this is exactly what it means." We'll come back to it because we are going to get with question 15 in the context, which presents the sharpest contrast. Then we'll maybe have something to kind of play with a little bit. Number 14, sentence beginning, the lamed walk. So we're taking a look here in line 6, going through 9. The lamed walk, the blind saw, sick were healed, dead were raised, demons were expelled, and then even the nature of the laws of nature frequently suspended. What is the purpose of that sentence? In the sense, how is it related to the sentence that comes before it? What does that sentence do for the previous line, which would be beginning during the age of Christ, of his apostles, and of the first disciples, the doctrine which they preached was confirmed by innumerable prodigies.
I said C.
Okay, so we're going with C. Idea that it provides examples to support a general statement. What's the general statement?
During the age of Christ, of his apostles, and of their disciples, the doctrine which they preached was confirmed by.
So we get a bunch of prodigies, and then that follow-up sentence is going, hey, here's what happened. The lame walked, the blind saw, so on and so forth. So yeah, the answer to 14, C. It's providing examples to support that general statement of the first one. 15. In the context of the passage, which of the following presents the sharpest contrast to the supine inattention? Now, certainly your answer on 15 is going to be dependent probably on your answer for 13. Julie, Marissa, both of you went E, or went, yeah, E. What'd you do for 15? Okay, so you went D. We had a whole bunch of C going the result of horrified reaction. What were some answers for, like Lana, you said C, right? For 13, the one that we did not answer?
Yeah.
And Hannah, you went C. What did you guys put for 15?
I
Still put D?
A.
Went A. Noel, you were saying D, I think, for 13?
I don't know what I put for 15 because I didn't know, so I didn't mark it on here. I just answered a bubble on the scan.
Did you like cross any out? Like there's no marks on there whatsoever? This was like, I have no clue.
Yep.
Okay.
I said D for 13.
Okay.
So for 15 I said C.
Went C. Okay. I'm glad you mentioned I had no idea, so I just guessed. If you don't know, you still guess. Don't skip the question. If you are like the younger sibling by a wide margin, your older brothers and sisters could be going, don't guess. That's bad because you lose points. You used to. You used to gain a point for getting a correct answer. You used to lose a quarter of a point if you got an incorrect answer, and nothing would happen if you skipped it. That's no longer the case. Whether you skip a question or you get a question wrong, you don't lose any points. So there's no reason to simply just skip something because you don't know. So if you left it blank, hey, you could have had a chance of getting it right. If you got it wrong, it's no difference than if you skipped it. So you may as well guess no matter what. Key word for me in question 15 is going to be sharpest contrast. For the passage in itself, what is the contrast that's taking place? What two viewpoints are being contrasted? And it's kind of implied.
Science
Okay, so you have this religious viewpoint that would be taking place, and you have the scientific viewpoint. How shall we excuse the supine inattention of the pagan and philosophic world to those evidences which were presented by the hand of omnipotence, not to their reason, but to their senses? What do you think he means when he writes by the hand of omnipotence? What's an omniscient narrator? All-knowing. What's omnipotence going to be? How shall we excuse the some kind of inattention of people not knowing what the hand of omnipotence is putting out there? Dealing with the Bible, hand of omnipotence is going to be God. Yeah, so you're looking at this from a religious standpoint. So how can we excuse their inattention of the pagans and the philosophic world for not understanding what was going on at that time? You're contrasting the viewpoint of the Bible with that of science. How do Pliny and Seneca and those folks really get discussed when you take a look at, when it came to prodigies or it came to phenomenons, what was really happening to them, or how were they able to find all this stuff? Because no matter what, they were how would you describe the scientists of the time? Would we describe them as having innumerable prodigies, ordinary occupations of life and safety, earliest intelligence, indefatigable curiosity, or a singular defect of light? When it comes to describing the scientists of the time and their laborious works that they were keeping track, his indefatigable curiosity could collect. 15 is describing the men of science. How would this contrast with the supine inattention of the pagans? If they have indefatigable curiosity that they are not going to be denied no matter what, what's the sharpest contrast to you having a drive that you're going to stop at nothing? That's going to make the correct answer for 13. Horrified reaction, momentary lapse, or a result of lethargic indifference. Sorry, Corey, it's not A or B. My curiosity is tireless. What's going to be the opposite? It's going to be E. It's a tough question because supine basically means lazy. You don't care, kind of meek, not too worried about it. So how can we excuse their lethargic indifference? Well, you're contrasting that with that indefatigable curiosity. These are describing the men of that time from his viewpoint for the science aspect. So that sharpest contrast is going to end up being E. Now, if you miss 13 and 15, that doesn't sink you for the whole entire thing because you're still going to have many more questions that are dealing with the overall viewpoint of the passage. But 14 would be one that you want to try to be able to capitalize on because you're looking at how sentences simply just get related to one another. For number 16, lines 7 to 9, and 16 is a common question that gets missed. The laws of nature frequently suspended for the benefit of the church, this would be the line that Lana was taking a look at, contributes which to the following sentence? Reinforces a reverent tone, seeks to persuade to believe in the age of miracles, causes the reader to question, provides historical information, or causes the reader to doubt the sincerity of Christians. Since you mentioned critical tone, what are you leaning toward? You're going towards C. Anyone want to fight Lana over C? Who would win, you or Hannah in arm wrestling? Be confident in your abilities. Hannah's saying yes. Yeah, answer is C. If you don't pick up on the critical tone, that question becomes difficult to answer. If you do pick up on the critical tone to question the events, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. Why would you question the events? Well, because this miraculous event passed without notice in that age of science and history. These people who were working tirelessly never made note of it. Awful spectacle refers to which of the following? So in line 10, where awful spectacle gets referenced, but the sages of Greece and Rome turned aside from the awful spectacle and pursuing ordinary occupations of life and study. horrifying sights of demons, terrible degradation, indifferent pagan philosophers, credulous apostles, disciples, or the miraculous prodigies, those miracles that were happening. Alyssa, it goes with E. And again, you take a look at the context of lines that are happening, mentioning a general statement. Now here comes our specific examples, but the sages turned aside from the awful spectacle. What's the awful spectacle? The idea that was just getting described with all these innumerable prodigies before. It would be the miraculous Christian prodigies. Again, if you're recognizing, picking up on that critical tone, it starts to make a little bit more sense. The subject appeared unconscious is the church, the sages, Greece and Rome, life and study, government of the world. If you have a question like this, temporarily, I would simply ignore what your answer options are and go back to the sentence itself, line 7. What is the subject of appeared unconscious in line 11? But the sages of Greece and Rome turned aside from the awful spectacle and pursuing the ordinary occupations of life and study appeared unconscious of any alterations in the moral or physical government of the world. So what is appearing or what appeared unconscious based on that sentence? You're saying that like I got that one wrong. Yeah, it's B. The sages. And here's what's happening with the multiple choice questions. You're not getting general overview. You get much more specific things. And so these tend to be a little bit more grammatically. Can you understand how sentences work together? Can you understand the organization, the structure of ideas? Not, can you give me a summary of a main character? Every single passage that's going to show up on your AP exam, it's nonfiction. So there's not going to be characterization. There's not going to be foil characters. There's not going to be a whole lot of literary devices. It's more of, can you understand how all these things work together? So when it says the subject, like you're literally going back to what is fulfilling that action that's taking place. 19, I would say, kind of plays off of 17. In the context of the passage, which of the following can be inferred from the sentence that begins, even this miraculous event, which starts in line 15? So even this miraculous event, which ought to have excited the wonder, the curiosity, and devotion of mankind, passed without notice in an age of science and history. Is the author criticizing mankind for not paying attention? Is the reign of Tiberius an age of pseudoscience or not real science? During the age of Christ and his apostles, mankind was lacking in curiosity. Because of their lack of knowledge, historians were insensitive. Or if the event had really occurred, it would have been noticed by the eminent historians. If he's being critical of the contents of the Bible, chances are then which one of these would line up with maybe doubting the events that took place? It's going to be E. Main idea really begins to kind of prove itself throughout the course of the entire passage a little bit more at this point. Which of the following best restates the meaning of the word intelligence in line 20? So for this one, it's going to be a plug and play. This is where you do want to put in these words and see which synonym ultimately would work better. So our first option is reports. I take a look at line 20. Who must have experienced the immediate effects or received the earliest reports of the prodigy. Reports sounds pretty good. I'm going to be confident in myself that I don't have to then run through every single option, and it ends up being reports. If you're unsure, then yeah, you do have to run through codes, intellect, intuition, substance. If you're pretty confident in the answer, run with that first one, save yourself time, move on to the next. Because I think at this point, by the time you're getting to the 7th or 8th question, you should have a pretty good understanding of how the passage is and whether or not you think your term is going to be correct. The clause, which his indefatigable curiosity could collect, modifies which? Seneca, Pliny, prodigy, work, or phenomenon that we have at this point. So, what do you notice about all these answer choices, by the way, in relation to the line? We're looking at line 22, 23. We got line 18, 18, 20, 21, 21. All of those options are coming from before. So we certainly have to make sure we're looking at areas before lines 22, 23. What is it modifying? What is it essentially kind of referring back to? My earliest one is line 18, so I'm going to start up here where that sentence would begin. It happened during the lifetime of Seneca and the elder Pliny, who must have experienced the immediate effects or received the earliest intelligence of the prodigy. Each of these philosophers in laborious work has recorded all the great phenomena of nature, earthquakes, meteors, comets, and eclipses, which his indefatigable curiosity could collect. What is it modifying or referring back to? What is he trying to collect with this driven viewpoint or this desire? He wants to get as much information as he can about which one of those terms. He's not looking back to a specific person like Seneca or Pliny, but he's trying to gain as much information as he can about the phenomena that are happening around him. As we do more and more of these, you want to start to try to pay attention as to which types of questions are giving me more trouble. Is it the, making the overall understanding of the passage? Is it ones where I have to take a look at what it's modifying versus subjects and things like that, pronoun and antecedent, things like that? Or strictly vocabulary? Like if supine inattention is the one that's holding you down at this point, I don't think that's one that's going to have to really be a big viewpoint that you have to worry about. 22 can be a difficult one, again, depending on the viewpoint that you have. In the author's view, the most likely reason that Pliny failed to mention the greatest phenomenon to which the mortal eye has been the witness since the creation of the globe, well, if he's being critical, you would be getting the sense that this person would be arguing what about those events? They probably never occurred, which is going to go A. So 22, 19, 17, 16, all of those now kind of have the same feeling to it. Which of the following is a restatement of the phrase singular defect of light? I told you find the correct answer, don't do process of elimination. There are two answers that I would eliminate just by the question. Any guesses? Which of the following is a restatement of the phrase singular defect of light? Or excuse me, there's not two I would eliminate, there's three that I would eliminate. There are two that I would focus on. When do you restate something? I'm going to restate that you have a TWA for Catcher in the Rye on the 16th. If I'm going to restate it, Alyssa's absolutely right, you're going to restate it after it was said the first time. So it was stated the first time in line 28, so I am going to be taking out A and B, and now I'm going to be taking a look at 29, 30, 31, 32 to figure out which one of those is going to be a restatement of that singular defect of light. So going back to the passage, he contents himself with describing the singular defect of light which followed the murder of Caesar, when during the greatest part of the year the orb of the sun appeared pale and without splendor. This season of obscurity, which cannot surely be compared with the preternatural darkness of the Passion, has already been celebrated by most of the poets and historians of the age. This what? Season of obscurity is what is going back to that singular defect of light. That answers D. And then the last one, the mention of the paleness of the sun and the murder of Caesar is used primarily to show that since we're being possibly critical, what do we want to prove about Pliny? That he would pay attention to these things, and he was not someone who had supine inattention, that he was not indifferent to astronomical prodigies. It is a tough passage. I mean, you get 6 out of 12, you're breaking even. You're at a 3 for this one. If out of those 12 you were getting 8 correct, that's 2/3. You're doing pretty well with that. So coming back to Scantron, top number would be what should be in Power School out of 24. Bottom number would be that 1 to 5. If you know that the top number is not what's in Power School, let me know and we can fix it.